For most of our lives, there's been a quiet assumption that the United States would always sit at the top of the global economic pyramid. Its dollar ruled global trade. Its corporations stretched across continents. And through institutions like the IMF, the World Bank, and the WTO, Washington didn't just play the game, it wrote the rules. But something has changed. What's happening right now between the United States and China isn't just another trade dispute. It's the unraveling of a decades-long illusion. The illusion that one country could permanently dictate the terms of global trade. China's recent move to impose massive maritime tariffs on U.S. shipping isn't a symbolic act of retaliation. It's a statement. A declaration that the age of unilateral American dominance is ending, and a new balance is beginning to take shape. Before we get deeper into how this shift could reshape the world economy, if you're finding value in this kind of long-form analysis, take a quick second to like this video and share it. It really helps more people discover content like this. Now let's unpack what's really happening here. For decades, China was known as the world's factory, a cheap manufacturing base for global brands. But that old picture is outdated. Over the past 20 years, China has quietly transformed itself into something much larger, the engine of global trade. This transformation wasn't luck. It was deliberate. Massive investments in ports, shipyards, railways, and shipping infrastructure, all linked under the Belt and Road Initiative, gave Beijing more than just economic power. It gave China control over the arteries of world commerce. Today, Chinese companies own or operate key maritime hubs from Greece's Piraeus port to Sri Lanka's Hambantota and Pakistan's Gwadar. These aren't just business ventures, like they're strategic levers of influence. When China decides to adjust tariffs or redirect shipping routes, it can do so with real tangible leverage. And that leverage is structural. Unlike military power, which depends on threat and force, this power rests on contracts, partnerships, and ownership. The quiet kind of control that shapes outcomes without firing a shot. Even the materials that keep global trade afloat, steel, electronics, navigation systems, are increasingly Chinese. If the US wanted to bypass China in these industries, it couldn't do it easily. The supply chains are too deep, too interconnected, and too dependent on Chinese output. Now, here's where the irony hits. For years, US policymakers framed their tariffs as patriotic, tools to punish unfair competition, revive American manufacturing, and bring jobs home. It was a simple and emotionally powerful narrative. But the reality turned out to be far more complicated and far more painful for ordinary Americans. Every tariff imposed by Washington in the last decade, whether under Trump, Biden, or anyone else, has created ripple effects that bounce right back home. The burden doesn't land on the big corporations or the political class. It lands on consumers, small businesses, and workers. When tariffs raise the cost of imported steel or aluminum, car prices go up. Appliances cost more. Construction materials jump. Tariffs on electronics and machinery hit small manufacturers, while agricultural tariffs close off export markets. And who pays for it? Not the policymakers who impose them. You do. Every grocery trip, every home renovation, every product that quietly costs a little more. It's a cycle of economic self-harm wrapped in patriotic language. And yet this pattern isn't new. For over a century, tariffs have been used less as a shield for workers and more as a tool for corporate lobbying. Large companies lobby for tariffs to eliminate foreign competition, then raise prices anyway. It's protectionism for profits, not for people. Meanwhile, inflation rises, wages stagnate, and public trust erodes. If you've been noticing that contradiction, that constant talk of protecting jobs while prices keep climbing, you're not alone. In fact, I'd love to hear what you think. Do you believe tariffs are still a useful tool in today's global economy? Or are they just political theater? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every one of them. Now let's zoom out. Other countries have been paying attention to how the US has used trade as a weapon, and they've started to adapt. If Washington can use economic leverage, so can they. Over the past few years, we've seen the emergence of new regional trade agreements, alternative payment systems, and growing use of non-dollar currencies. China's Belt and Road Network, along with institutions like the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, are all part of that broader response. The result? A steady erosion of American economic dominance. China's maritime tariffs are just one piece of a much larger pattern, a structural rebalancing of global power. What used to be a unipolar system, with the United States at the center, is giving way to a multipolar one, where several competing powers share influence. And this shift exposes the double-edged nature of globalization itself. For decades, globalization was America's advantage, the foundation of its prosperity. But the deeper the world became interconnected, the more exposed the US became when others decided to push back. Every tariff, every sanction, now ricochets through that same network, multiplying costs and undermining the system that once benefited Washington the most. It's poetic in a way. Globalization has turned on its maker. Meanwhile, China has evolved from a rule taker to a rule maker. By controlling logistics routes, supply chains, and production hubs, Beijing now shapes the conditions of trade, not just participates in them. When a nation can dictate how and where goods move, that's not just economic power. That's strategic power, and that's exactly where China stands today. This doesn't mean China is replacing the US as a new global empire. What's happening is more complex. It's the fracturing of empire. We're moving from one center of gravity to several, from a world of dominance to a world of balance, messy, contested, but ultimately more representative. Of course, the US isn't disappearing, but the monopoly is gone. The rules of global trade are no longer written in one language or from one capital. And that's where the biggest challenge lies: credibility. Each time Washington claims that tariffs are working, the numbers tell a different story. Trade deficits remain, inflation lingers. Allies begin exploring new systems that don't revolve around the dollar. The rest of the world is no longer asking for permission. It's making alternative plans. But beneath all the geopolitics and macroeconomics, there's a deeper question: who benefits? Because tariffs, at their core, are not just economic tools. They are instruments of class power. Every tariff that claims to defend workers ends up enriching someone else. It's the same old story. A policy sold as protection, but structured as extraction. And when people realize that, like when they see prices rise while wages don't, cynicism sets in. They stop believing in reform, in fairness, in promises of change. That loss of trust is as damaging as any trade war. And that's why the global pushback we're seeing, whether through China's maritime tariffs or new trade blocs forming in the global south, isn't just about economics. It's about justice. For too long, the global system rewarded a few at the top, while extracting from the rest. Now, nations are beginning to rebel against that imbalance, to demand fairer terms of exchange. What we're witnessing isn't chaos, it's correction. When China acts, it does so with a strategy that's been decades in the making. It's not reactionary, it's architectural. It's building an alternative model of global trade designed to be resilient against Western pressure. That doesn't mean it's perfect or altruistic, but it is deliberate. The bigger picture here is about the redistribution of power in the global system. Every empire eventually reaches the point where its own tools of dominance, finance, sanctions, tariffs, begin to backfire. The same tools that once enforced control start accelerating its decline. That's what's happening now. And as this new balance takes shape, one truth becomes clear. The global economy is no longer something one nation can control. It's a contested arena shaped by many, negotiated in real time. So, as we watch this tug of war unfold between Washington and Beijing, we're not just witnessing a trade dispute. We're watching the birth of a new order, one that may be less stable, less predictable, but ultimately more balanced. And before we wrap up, if you've enjoyed this deep dive and want more insights into how global trade, geopolitics, and economics intertwine, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss the next one. Thank you for watching, and for thinking critically about the world beyond the headlines. Because this story, the unraveling of an economic illusion, isn't about China versus the US. It's about a global system learning, once again, that power never stays unchallenged forever.